Welcome to Moon's Dark Tales. Tonight, we delve into the shadowy depths of Gotham City with Gotham's blind justice. What if the justice system was not just broken, but designed to fail? Follow the relentless Harvey Dent as he battles corruption on all fronts, facing off against the powerful Falcone crime family and a secretive force lurking in the shadows. Sit back, relax, and let the shadows of Gotham consume you. Chapter 1: Shadows in the Court. The cold, flickering lights of Gotham's courthouse cast long shadows across Harvey Dent's desk. The thick oak door behind him creaked slightly as if the weight of the city itself pushed against it, trying to break through. Harvey's hand rested on a small stack of case files, his cases. Cases that should have seen justice served, but instead had vanished into the bureaucratic ether. Corruption. It suffocated everything in this city, from the lowliest street corners to the most powerful offices. And as much as Harvey fought against it, it always seemed one step ahead. Gotham, he muttered under his breath, staring out the window at the rain-soaked streets below. What have you become? He had asked himself this question more times than he could count. But tonight, something felt different, like the city's rotten core had begun to spill out into the open, and he was the only one who cared enough to stop it. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, followed by a sharp knock. Harvey straightened his posture, his face hardening. "Come in," he said, his voice clipped. The door swung open, revealing Rachel, his assistant. Her expression was grim, and Harvey could tell from the way her eyes flickered to the floor that something wasn't right. "Sir, there's been another murder," she said softly, barely above a whisper. Murder. The word hit him like a hammer. It wasn't unusual in Gotham, of course. Murders happened almost every night. But this was different. He could feel it. Another? Harvey asked, his voice low, controlled. Yes, linked to the Falcone family, again. Rachel stepped closer, placing a thin folder on his desk. They're saying it's another message. Same as the last. Harvey stared at the folder for a long moment, a knot forming in his stomach. He knew what was inside: another nameless victim, another life lost in the endless cycle of violence that the Falcone family unleashed upon Gotham. Carmine Falcone had the city wrapped around his finger, and not even the law could break that grip. Yet. Harvey opened the folder slowly, revealing a series of crime scene photos. A body, face down in a filthy alleyway. No identifying marks, no wallet, no name. Just another ghost added to Gotham's endless list. But it was the symbol, scrawled in blood across the wall above the victim, that caught Harvey's attention. "What is that?" he muttered, narrowing his eyes. The symbol was crude, almost childlike, but it was unmistakably intentional. "We don't know yet," Rachel replied. "Some say it's a warning, others think it's a signature." Harvey's mind raced. The Falcone family was organized, calculated. They didn't leave loose ends, and they certainly didn't send messages without a reason. This was different. "Get me everything you have on the previous cases," Harvey said, pushing the folder aside. "I want to know who these victims are. Who they were before they became part of this mess." Rachel nodded and left the room without another word. Harvey leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. It always came back to Falcone. Always. The courtroom battles, the legal loopholes, the failed convictions. Falcone was untouchable, protected by layers of crooked officials and dirty money. But Harvey wasn't giving up. He couldn't. Not when there were still people out there waiting for justice. The rain tapped against the window, a soft, relentless rhythm, like the pulse of the city itself. Harvey stared out at the lights of Gotham, his thoughts drifting back to the days when he believed the law could fix everything. When he was fresh, idealistic, and foolish. Gotham had a way of chewing up men like him and spitting them out broken, cynical. But Harvey still believed he had T.O. His phone buzzed on the desk, jolting him out of his reverie. A message. He glanced at the screen. "I have something for you. Meet me at the docks. 11 p.m. Alone. No name, no details. Just a time and place." Harvey's eyes narrowed. He had received anonymous tips before, but this one felt different. Dangerous. But that was Gotham, wasn't it? Danger around every corner, betrayal in every handshake. Harvey stood, pulling his coat from the back of his chair. He could feel the weight of the city on his shoulders as he headed for the door. He wasn't sure what he was walking into, but he knew he didn't have a choice. The docks were silent when Harvey arrived. The smell of salt water and rust hung in the air, mingling with the damp, metallic scent of the rain-soaked city. He could hear the distant hum of the harbor, the occasional creak of old boats shifting against the ropes that held them in place. But beyond that, silence. Harvey walked deeper into the maze of shipping containers and abandoned warehouses. The darkness here felt thicker, more oppressive, as if it swallowed every ounce of light that dared to intrude. A figure stepped out of the shadows. "Dent," the voice said, rough and low. "You're braver than I thought." Harvey stopped, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun tucked under his coat. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice firm. The figure stepped closer, the faint light of a nearby street lamp revealing his face. It was a man Harvey had seen before, though only in passing. A lowlife, someone who lingered on the fringes of Gotham's underworld. "I'm just a messenger," the man said, his lips curling into a grin. "But I've got something you're going to want to hear." Harvey remained silent, his eyes locked on the man. "The Falcone family's got their hands dirtier than you think," the man continued. "Drugs, sure. Guns? Of course. But there's more. They're making moves, Dent. Big ones." "What kind of moves?" Harvey asked, his heart beginning to race. The man laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "Let's just say the body you found isn't the first, and it won't be the last." Harvey's stomach churned. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice barely a whisper. The man's grin widened. "I've got names, dates, places. But it's going to cost you." Harvey took a step forward, his voice low and menacing. "You come to me with this, and you think you're going to extort me?" The man's grin faltered. "I'm just looking for a fair deal, Dent. You want Falcone, I want out. Clean slate." Harvey stared at him for a long moment. He knew better than to trust a man like this. but Gotham didn't play fair, and neither could he. "Fine," Harvey said at last. "But if you're lying to me..." The man raised his hands defensively. "I'm not. You'll see." He pulled a small envelope from his jacket and handed it to Harvey. "Everything you need is in there. But be careful, Dent. You're not the only one looking into this." Harvey took the envelope, his eyes never leaving the man's face. "And who else is looking?" he asked. The man's grin returned, though it was colder this time, more sinister. "Let's just say you're being watched." Harvey felt a chill run down his spine as the man disappeared back into the shadows. He stood alone in the rain, the weight of the envelope heavy in his hand. As he turned to leave, Harvey couldn't shake the feeling that he had just taken the first step down a very dark path, one that he might not return from. And somewhere in the distance, Gotham's shadows shifted, as if they were alive, waiting. Chapter 2: Echoes of the Underworld. The night was colder than usual, Gotham's streets slick with rain and filth. Harvey Dent walked with purpose, his coat pulled tight against the biting wind. His mind was racing, thoughts tangled in a web of uncertainty. The envelope sat heavy in his inner pocket, a constant reminder that something was happening, something big. Falcones' grip on Gotham had always been ironclad, but this felt different. Darker. The docs had provided a lead, but Harvey knew better than to trust it blindly. Yet the promise of more bodies turning up, of Gotham bleeding in the alleys while he sat in court fighting a broken system, gnawed at him. He needed to act, and quickly. The only way forward was deeper into the city's underbelly, into the world of criminals who whispered their secrets in the shadows. He found himself standing outside the Iceberg Lounge, the neon sign flickering, casting an eerie glow on the wet pavement. The lounge was the heart of Gotham's nightlife, but more importantly, it was a nest of criminals. At the center of it all was Oswald Cobblepot, better known as the Penguin. He had long worked under Falcone, handling the dirty logistics, drugs, money laundering, the kind of crime that didn't leave easy trails to follow. Harvey took a breath, steadying himself. He knew he was being watched, just as the mysterious informant had warned him. But he had no choice. The walls were closing in, and he needed to know what was going on in the city's darkest corners. The bouncer at the entrance gave Harvey a look of thinly veiled contempt. He was a regular face at the courthouse, a thug, no doubt. But tonight, Harvey wasn't here as the city's white knight. Tonight, he needed information. Dent, the bouncer grunted. "What brings you down here, promoter? Lost your way to the courthouse?" Harvey ignored the jab. "I'm here to see Cobblepot." The bouncer's face twitched, but he stepped aside. No one wanted to get in Harvey's way. Not anymore. His reputation had grown in recent months, the man who would fight anyone, anything, to bring justice to Gotham. But sometimes that came with more enemies than allies. Inside, the lounge buzzed with life. The clinking of glasses, the hum of conversations, the low thrum of jazz in the background. But behind it all, there was an air of tension. Fear. Harvey felt it in the way eyes darted towards him, in the hurried whispers as he walked through the room. Penguin's office was tucked away, behind a door marked only by a silver plate. As Harvey pushed it open, he was greeted by the sight of Oswald Cobblepot himself, sitting behind an elaborate desk, counting money with the precision of someone who'd done it all his life. He looked up, his beady eyes narrowing at the sight of Harvey. Well, if it isn't Gotham's golden boy," Penguin sneered, his voice grating, like nails on a chalkboard. "What brings you to my humble establishment? Out of leads already?" Harvey stood tall, his face unreadable. "I'm not here to play games, Oswald." "Oh, I don't doubt that," Penguin chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. "But this is dangerous territory for you. You should know better than to come down here alone." "I need answers," Harvey said, stepping forward. "And I think you know exactly what I'm looking for." Penguin's grin widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're walking into a minefield, Dent. What makes you think I'd be inclined to help you out?" "I know you're moving drugs for Falcone," Harvey said, his voice cold. "I know you're involved in something bigger than you're letting on. People are dying, Oswald, and I'm not leaving until I know why." For a moment, the room was silent. Then, Penguin leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. "Do you know why Falcone is still at the top, Dent? Why he stayed there all these years while men like you keep banging their heads against the wall, thinking they can take him down?" Penguin paused, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Because he's smarter than all of you. And he knows how to use people. And you're one of his pawns?" Harvey shot back. Penguin's expression darkened. "I'm no one's pawn, Dent. I've carved out my piece of this city, and I'm not about to let you or anyone else take it from me." Harvey crossed his arms, unfazed. "Then prove it. Give me something I can use against Falcone. Help me bring him down, and maybe you get to keep your piece of the city." Penguin's eyes glinted with something Harvey couldn't quite place. For a moment, it looked like he might take the bait. But then he shook his head slowly, a smile creeping back onto his face. "Sorry, Dent. But Falcone and we have an understanding. And you? You're just another player in a game you don't even know the rules to." Harvey's jaw clenched. He had expected resistance, but the lack of progress was infuriating. Damn it. He turned on his heel, heading for the door, but Penguin's voice stopped him. "You should be careful, Dent," he said, his tone almost mocking. "The streets are dangerous these days. And people who dig too deep, they tend to disappear." Harvey didn't respond. He pushed through the door and back into the lounge, his mind racing. Penguin had given him nothing, but the threat lingered in the air. He was being watched. He could feel it, like a weight pressing down on him with every step. As Harvey left the Iceberg Lounge, he was certain of one thing: the web he had found himself in was far more intricate than he'd thought. Falcone's reach extended into every part of Gotham's underworld, and Penguin was just one piece of the puzzle. But something didn't add up. The symbol, the bodies, this wasn't Falcone's usual style. There was a new player at the table, and they were sending a message. But who? The rain beat down harder as Harvey made his way through the city streets, his thoughts a storm of their own. He needed to talk to someone who knew the underworld better than he did, someone who could decode this symbol and tell him if this was something bigger than even Falcone. There was only one person who came to mind: Gloria Vega. Gloria Vega had been a staple in Gotham's underground for years. Once a rising star in the legal world, she had fallen from grace after a high-profile case had gone wrong, and she'd found herself on the wrong side of the law. Now, she worked in the shadows, dealing information to those willing to pay. Harvey found her in the usual place, a rundown diner on the edge of Gotham's East End. The place was nearly empty, save for a few stragglers nursing cold cups of coffee and the waitress who seemed more interested in her phone than in her customers. Gloria sat at the back, her sharp eyes catching sight of Harvey as soon as he walked in. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing as he slid into the booth across from her. "You're late," she said, her voice smooth, like silk hiding a razor's edge. "I wasn't aware this was a social call," Harvey replied, leaning forward. "I need your help, Gloria." "Of course you do," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. "That's why people like you come to people like me." "So, what is it this time? Another Falcone cover-up? A dirty cop you need to expose?" Harvey shook his head, pulling out the envelope from his pocket. "I found something. A symbol drawn at a crime scene. I need to know what it means." Gloria took the envelope, pulling out the photo of the symbol. She stared at it for a long moment, her face unreadable. This isn't Falcone," she said slowly, her eyes narrowing. "This is older. Much older." "What do you mean?" Gloria placed the photo on the table, tapping it lightly. "This symbol, it's not just some random mark. It's a calling card. One that hasn't been seen in Gotham for decades." Harvey's heart pounded in his chest. "Who?" Gloria leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The Court of Shadows. They're an old crime syndicate, long thought to be dead. But if this symbol is showing up again, it means they're back. And if they're back, Dent, Gotham's in for a war." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and foreboding. Harvey felt the weight of the revelation settle in his gut. He had thought he was dealing with Falcone's empire, with Penguin's criminal enterprise. But this was something much worse. "Where do I find them?" Harvey asked, his voice tight. Gloria shook her head. "You don't find them, Dent. They find you. And when they do, you'd better be ready." Harvey left the diner, the rain now falling in sheets around him. His mind was spinning, trying to process what Gloria had told him. The Court of Shadows. An ancient syndicate, thought to be long gone, now making moves in Gotham. If they were back, then the city was in more danger than ever before. And Harvey was at the center of it all. He had to move quickly. The stakes had just risen, and there was no telling who else was caught in the crossfire. But one thing was certain: Gotham's war had just begun. Chapter 3: The Enigma Unfolds. Harvey Dent hadn't slept in days. His apartment was dark, a single desk lamp casting a pale glow over the mess of papers and photos spread out before him. The symbol found at the crime scene stared back at him from every angle, and each time he looked at it, a deeper sense of unease settled in his gut. Gloria Vega had shaken him with her mention of the Court of Shadows, a crime syndicate that, if truly resurfacing, could shift the balance of power in Gotham in ways Harvey could barely imagine. Sitting alone in his cramped office, Harvey felt the weight of Gotham's dark history pressing down on him. This wasn't just about Falcone anymore. He was no longer battling the familiar faces of Gotham's underworld, but something much older, something deadlier. He grabbed a photo of the most recent victim. A woman, mid-30s, no criminal background. Just another body found in an alley, a pawn in a game Harvey didn't yet understand. That damned symbol painted above her, mocking him with its cryptic simplicity. It gnawed at him, pulling him deeper into an obsession he could feel growing stronger with every passing hour. "Why you?" he whispered to the photo. "Why any of them?" There had to be a pattern, a link between the victims that tied them to this mysterious symbol and the court. He picked up his phone, dialing Rachel's number. She picked up on the second ring. "Rachel, I need you to get me everything we have on the victims. Every detail. Every name. Family background, work history, everything. There's a connection here. I just don't see it yet." "I'm on it," Rachel said, the sound of her typing already in the background. "Do you really think this is connected to Falcone?" "I don't know," Harvey replied, his voice tight. "But I can't shake the feeling that there's something bigger behind all of this." Hours passed, the night slipping away into the early hours of the morning. Harvey's apartment was silent, save for the constant shuffle of papers as he combed through the details Rachel had sent over. He felt like he was drowning in the weight of it all. Victims that didn't belong to the usual underworld circles. No ties to drugs, no records of past criminal activity. On the surface, they were nobodies, but Harvey knew that wasn't the case. No one in Gotham was ever a nobody. Then, it hit him. A subtle detail he had overlooked. All of the victims had one thing in common: they had each, at one point, served on Gotham's jury panels. Harvey's heart raced as he flipped through the files, confirming what he already suspected. Every victim had played a role in the criminal justice system, deciding the fate of cases that had passed through his court. And not just any cases. Cases involving Falcone's organization. He stared at the files in disbelief. The killings weren't random. They were deliberate. But why? Before he could process the revelation, his phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen. "Meet me. Warehouse on 23rd, midnight. Come alone." Harvey's pulse quickened. It was from Gloria. Another lead, or another trap? Either way, he didn't have a choice. The deeper he went, the clearer it became that he was already in too far to back out now. The warehouse on 23rd was as desolate as it was foreboding. The rain had let up, leaving the streets soaked and glistening under the faint glow of distant streetlights. Harvey stood outside for a moment, his breath visible in the cold air. He felt the weight of his gun holstered beneath his coat, a cold reassurance that he wasn't walking into this meeting completely defenseless. Inside, the warehouse was a maze of rusted metal and stacked crates. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay, but something else lingered there too: fear. Gloria was waiting in the far corner, her face shadowed beneath the dim overhead light. She looked tense, her eyes darting toward the entrance every few seconds, as if she expected someone to follow Harvey in. "You got here fast," she said, her voice low. "That's good. Means we don't have much time. What did you find?" Harvey asked, his patience wearing thin. "I know these victims are connected to Falcones cases. Jury members, all of them. But why would Falcone care about people like that?" Gloria's lips twisted into a grim smile. "You're not seeing the whole picture, Dent. Falcone's not the one pulling the strings. The court is." Harvey's chest tightened. "The Court of Shadows?" Gloria nodded. "They've been in hiding for years, controlling things from the background. And now they're making moves. But they're not after Falcone, they're after control. Gotham's justice system is their playground, and they've been rigging it for decades." Harvey stared at her, the pieces starting to click together in his mind. "So these killings, they're a message?" "They're a purge," Gloria said. "The court is cleaning house, removing anyone who could compromise their grip on the system. The jury members, the judges, the lawyers, they're all part of it. And if you keep digging, Dent, you're going to end up just like them." Harvey's pulse quickened. "Then why tell me this? What's your angle?" Gloria glanced over her shoulder, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Because I'm tired of living in the shadows. The court has ruined this city, and I'm done being part of their game." Before Harvey could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse. Both of them froze, their eyes darting toward the darkness. The footsteps grew louder, closer. "Run!" Gloria hissed, her eyes wide with fear. "They've found us." Harvey didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the nearest exit, the heavy thud of boots closing in behind him. He could hear Gloria following, her breath ragged as they burst out into the night. But the moment they hit the alley, the gunfire started. Pop! 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 Bullets whizzed past them, shattering the silence of the night. Harvey threw himself behind a dumpster, his heart pounding in his chest. Gloria ducked beside him, clutching her side where a bullet had grazed her. "They're not going to stop," she gasped. "We have to split up. You need to get out of here, Dent. They'll hunt you down if they think you know too much." "What?" Harvey hissed, his voice rising with frustration. "You expect me to run now?" Gloria gave him a hard look, her eyes filled with desperation. "If you don't, you won't survive the night. They won't let you." The gunfire was getting closer. Harvey's mind raced. He wasn't a cop, he wasn't trained for this kind of thing. But he wasn't about to let Gloria die because of him. "Go," she urged, pushing him toward the narrow alley that led back to the street. "I'll buy you time." Before Harvey could argue, she was already moving, darting out from behind the dumpster, drawing the gunfire away from him. He hesitated for a split second, watching as she vanished into the shadows. Then he ran. By the time Harvey made it back to his apartment, his clothes were soaked with rain and sweat, his lungs burning from the sprint. He slammed the door behind him, bolting it shut before collapsing onto the couch. His heart was still racing, adrenaline coursing through his veins. They had come for him, just like Gloria warned. He pulled the gun from his holster, placing it on the coffee table in front of him. It felt heavy, colder now, as if it were a part of a reality he hadn't fully grasped before tonight. Harvey was in deep, far deeper than he had anticipated when this all began. The Court of Shadows was real. They were pulling the strings, manipulating Gotham from the shadows. And now, they knew that Harvey Dent was onto them. He was no longer just a prosecutor in search of justice. He was a target. He leaned back, staring up at the ceiling. The pieces were finally coming together, but the picture they formed was something Harvey hadn't been prepared for. This wasn't about taking down Falcone anymore. This was about surviving. About bringing down an organization that had its roots so deeply buried in Gotham's foundation that pulling them out could bring the whole city down with it. But Harvey wasn't afraid. Not anymore. He had come too far to turn back now. In the distance, the sound of sirens echoed through the city streets. The rain began to fall harder, the wind howling through the cracks in the windows. Gotham was calling him, and Harvey knew there was no going back. This was just the beginning. Chapter 4, Beneath the Ice. The cold seeped into Harvey's bones as he stood at the entrance of the Iceberg Lounge, the familiar neon sign casting a sickly blue glow over the rain-slicked street. It was a place he had come to despise, not because of what it was, but because of what it represented. The heart of Gotham's criminal underworld. A sanctuary for the corrupt. A den of lies. He tightened his grip on the gun concealed under his coat. The events of the past week had pushed him beyond the brink of reason, beyond the law. Gloria was gone, disappeared, after their narrow escape from the warehouse. He hadn't heard from her since, and that fact gnawed at him. If the Court of Shadows had gotten to her, she might already be dead. Or worse, silenced forever in some forgotten corner of the city. He couldn't afford to think about that now. Not with what was at stake. The symbol on the wall, the killings, the court, it all led back here. Back to the Iceberg Lounge, and back to Oswald Cobblepot. Penguin had played it coy before, pretending not to know anything. But Harvey knew better now. He wasn't dealing with a simple criminal conspiracy. This was much bigger. Falcone's organization had cracks running through it, and something, or someone, was pushing through those cracks, manipulating events from the shadows. Penguin knew more than he had let on, and Harvey was going to make him talk. The inside of the lounge was crowded as usual, but tonight the air felt heavier, thick with a tension that even the oblivious patrons couldn't ignore. Harvey moved through the crowd with purpose, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. He could feel the weight of suspicious glances as he passed. Whispers followed him, but he didn't care. Let them whisper. At the far end of the room, behind a velvet robe, sat the man he had come for, Oswald Cobblepot, the Penguin. He sat at a corner booth, flanked by a couple of well-dressed goons, nursing a drink and laughing at something one of them had said. Harvey clenched his jaw. The image of Penguin enjoying himself while Gotham rotted around him was infuriating. Harvey approached the booth, and as soon as Penguin noticed him, his smile faded. His small, beady eyes narrowed, and he motioned for his men to step aside. Well, if it isn't our favorite crusader, Penguin drawled, his voice a low rasp. I was wondering when you'd come back. What is it this time, Dent? Did you come to drink or to preach? I'm not here to play games, Oswald, Harvey snapped, his voice hard and clipped. We're going to have a conversation. Now. Penguin chuckled, gesturing toward the seat across from him. Sit down then. Let's chat. Harvey remained standing. You lied to me before. You said you didn't know anything about the murders or the symbol at the crime scenes. Penguin raised an eyebrow, pretending to be offended. I'm hurt, Dent. You think I'd lie to you? After everything we've been through? Harvey leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing. Cut the act, Oswald. I know about the Court of Shadows. I know they're involved, and I know you're hiding something. Penguin's expression darkened, and for the first time, Harvey saw a flicker of real fear in his eyes. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by his usual smug grin. The Court of Shadows? Penguin said, laughing it off. You've been reading too many conspiracy theories, Dent. They're just a myth. A bedtime story to keep people like you chasing ghosts. Harvey's hand twitched toward the gun under his coat. Enough lies. You think I'm bluffing? He said, his voice dangerously low. I'm not playing around anymore. I know the court is back, and I know you're scared of them. So, tell me what you know, or I swear to God, I'll... Penguin's laugh cut him off, this time more genuine. You think a gun's going to scare me, Dent? I've faced worse than you. But Harvey wasn't backing down. He could feel the tension building in the air between them, the eyes of the room now fully on them. Before Harvey could respond, Penguin leaned forward, his smile fading. You don't get it, do you? You're in over your head. The court is real, sure, but you have no idea what you're dealing with. And no one does. Harvey's grip on his gun tightened, but he forced himself to stay calm. Then explain it to me. Penguin sighed, his eyes scanning the room as if checking for unseen threats. Then he leaned back in his chair, lowering his voice. I told you before, Dent. Falcone runs the streets. But the court? They run everything. They've been pulling the strings for decades. Cops, judges, politicians, all of them are in their pocket. So why are they killing people now? Harvey asked, his voice rising. What's the point of the bodies? The symbol? Penguin shook his head, looking almost weary. It's a purge. The court's cleaning house, making sure no one steps out of line. Falcone's empire is cracking, and the court is making their move. They want control, but they don't want anyone knowing they exist. Harvey's blood ran cold. Everything Gloria had said was true. The court wasn't just a threat, they were a force that had embedded themselves deep within Gotham's institutions. And you? Harvey demanded. Where do you fit into all this? Are you working for them too? Penguin's eyes flickered with something unreadable. I've survived this long because I know when to keep my head down, Dent. The court doesn't care about me. They're after bigger fish, people like you. Harvey's breath caught in his throat. People like me? Penguin leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. You think you're safe because you're the White Knight of Gotham, the one who's going to save the city? The court knows who you are, Dent. They know what you've been doing. And they've already decided how this ends. Harvey's heart pounded in his chest. They know. The court had been watching him all along, and now they were closing in. He didn't have time to react. From the corner of his eye, Harvey saw movement, a figure slipping through the crowd, heading straight for him. He barely had time to register the threat before a gunshot rang out. Pop! The bullet missed him by inches, shattering a glass on the table. The lounge erupted into chaos as people screamed and ducked for cover. Harvey hit the floor, drawing his own weapon, his mind racing. A hit. Right here. He glanced at Penguin, who had already scurried behind his guards, looking more terrified than ever. I told you. Penguin hissed. They're watching. They don't want you digging any deeper. Harvey scrambled to his feet, scanning the crowd for the shooter. His heart pounded in his chest as he spotted the man slipping through the exit, disappearing into the night. He was too fast. Harvey cursed under his breath. The Iceberg Lounge was now a war zone of shattered glass and overturned tables, patrons running for the doors. But Penguin's words echoed in Harvey's mind. The court knows. Later that night, Harvey sat alone in his apartment, the weight of the day crushing down on him. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. He hadn't caught the shooter. The court's assassin had vanished, leaving nothing behind but more questions. The rain battered the windows, a constant reminder of Gotham's unrelenting darkness. Harvey stared down at the papers on his desk, the symbol mocking him, daring him to keep going. Every lead he followed, every person he questioned, only pulled him deeper into the web of secrets and lies that the court had spun around the city. And now, they were coming for him. The sound of his phone ringing startled him from his thoughts. He picked it up, his hand trembling slightly. It was Rachel. Harvey, she said, her voice tense. I found something. You need to come to the office right now. What is it? Harvey asked, already grabbing his coat. It's about the symbol, Rachel said. I think I know what it means. Harvey's heart raced as he hung up the phone. The symbol. The killings. The court. Everything was connected, and now, finally, he was on the verge of uncovering the truth. But as he left his apartment and stepped into the rain-soaked streets of Gotham, a chilling thought crept into his mind. Was he ready for the truth? Chapter 5: The Deadly Verdict. The storm had broken over Gotham, its fury reflected in the endless sheets of rain that hammered the courthouse steps. Harvey Dent stood at the entrance, staring out at the darkened city with the grim resolve of a man who knew that the trial ahead was not just another case, it was a war. Inside the courthouse, the faces of the jury were solemn, the air thick with anticipation. It had all come down to this moment. The trial of Carmine Falcone. Months of investigation, secret deals, and dangerous alliances had led Harvey here, to the courtroom where Gotham's most powerful crime lord would finally be held to account. Yet, deep in his gut, Harvey felt that something was wrong. Very wrong. He walked slowly through the corridors of the courthouse, each step echoing with the weight of the decision he was about to face. It wasn't just about winning this case. He was fighting against something much darker than Falcone. The Court of Shadows, the hidden force that had infiltrated every corner of the city, was still out there, lurking, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Rachel had uncovered something critical about the symbol that connected the murders to the court, a key that could unravel the entire web of deception. But with every piece of truth that Harvey uncovered, the more he realized that justice in Gotham wasn't clean. It was tainted. And if he wasn't careful, he would become its next casualty. The courtroom was packed, buzzing with lone murmurs that faded as Harvey entered. He could feel every eye on him, the press, the public, the corrupted officials who had managed to blend into the crowd. But his focus was on Falcone, sitting smugly at the defense table. The crime boss was calm, unbothered, as if he already knew how this would end. Or maybe he did. Harvey locked eyes with Falcone for a brief moment, and in that instant, he saw the truth. Falcone was confident because he wasn't worried. The court had rigged this from the start, and Falcone was untouchable. Harvey's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. Not today. Taking his place at the prosecutor's table, Harvey inhaled deeply. This was it. The culmination of every fight he'd waged to bring justice to Gotham. But now, standing at the precipice, he understood something he hadn't before. The system wasn't just broken. It had been designed that way, to protect men like Falcone. The judge's gavel cracked like a thunderclap, silencing the courtroom. The proceedings began, the opening arguments laid out before the jury. Harvey's words were sharp, each one a blade aimed directly at Falcone's empire, slicing through the carefully constructed defenses that had shielded the crime lord for years. His case was airtight. Every piece of evidence, every testimony had been meticulously woven together to tear down the myth of Carmine Falcone's untouchability. But as the trial continued, Harvey noticed something. The jury. Their faces. They weren't reacting to his words. No matter how damning the evidence, how clear the connections, there was no flicker of shock, no spark of doubt. They sat like statues, unmovable, indifferent. It was then that he saw it. A symbol, faintly etched into one of the jurors' rings, the same symbol that had haunted Harvey throughout this entire investigation. The Court of Shadows had infiltrated the jury. After a tense recess, Harvey paced back and forth in his office. It was all a farce. The trial was rigged, and even if he presented every damning piece of evidence, the court had already decided the outcome. He could feel his control slipping, the rage bubbling beneath the surface. They had cornered him. And the worst part? They were taunting him with it, letting him know just how little power he had in the face of their influence. Rachel burst through the door, her face pale. "Harvey, we need to talk. Now." He turned, his face hardening at the urgency in her voice. "What is it?" She handed him a file. "I've been digging deeper into the court's connection to this case. It's not just about Falcone. The court's been orchestrating things far beyond what we thought. They've planted their people in the judiciary, in law enforcement, even in this office." Harvey's stomach twisted. "What are you saying?" I'm saying the court has eyes on everything. They're pulling strings we didn't even know existed, Rachel said, her voice tight with fear. And they're playing both sides. Falcone was never the end game. He's a pawn in a much bigger plan. Harvey's mind raced. Why? What do they gain from protecting him? They're not protecting him. They're using him to distract us. The real targets? They're in the courtroom today. You, me, the jury, we're all pieces in a game we don't understand. Harvey clenched his fists. They were toying with him. Back in the courtroom, Harvey felt the walls closing in around him. The defense had rested its case, and the closing arguments were approaching. But as Harvey stood before the jury, the familiar fire that had fueled him all these years flickered. How could he win a trial when the outcome had already been decided? He glanced at the jury again, his eyes locking on the symbol he now recognized. The jurors weren't listening. They were actors in a play. The court had rigged this from the start, and Harvey was their puppet. But Harvey wasn't the kind of man who played by their rules. He wouldn't go down without a fight. Harvey's closing argument was different than anything he had prepared. He abandoned the pre-written speech, the meticulously crafted statements. Instead, he spoke from the heart, laying bare the truth, not just about Carmine Falcone, but about the system itself. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Harvey began, his voice steady but charged with emotion. What you've witnessed here isn't just a trial. It's a reflection of something much larger. Gotham is a city in crisis, a place where corruption festers, and justice is bought and sold like a commodity. But today, I stand before you, not just to ask for a verdict, but to demand a reckoning. A reckoning with the truth. The jury was still. The weight of his words hung in the air, but he could see it in their eyes. They were too far gone, too entrenched in the web of the court to be swayed. But Harvey pressed on. Carmine Falcone has used fear, violence, and manipulation to build his empire, but he isn't the real power in Gotham. The real power hides in the shadows, pulling strings, making sure people like Falcone walk free. The system is broken because it was made that way. And we let it happen. He looked directly at the juror with the ring. But justice isn't supposed to serve the powerful. It's supposed to protect the innocent. And if we can't deliver that today, then we've already lost. The courtroom was silent. Harvey stepped back, his pulse racing, knowing full well that his words had likely fallen on deaf ears. The jury deliberated for what felt like hours, though Harvey knew it was merely a formality. He sat alone in his office, the sound of rain against the windows a steady reminder of Gotham's darkness. The verdict would come soon. One way or another, it was all about to end. A knock on the door broke the silence. Rachel stood in the doorway, her expression grim. They've reached a verdict. Harvey stood, his body tense, his mind racing with possibilities. He knew the jury was compromised. He knew the court had rigged this from the start. But part of him still clung to the hope that justice might prevail. As he entered the courtroom, the tension was palpable. The foreman stood, unfolding the slip of paper that contained the jury's decision. Harvey's heart pounded in his chest. The verdict was read aloud. Not guilty. A ripple of shock went through the courtroom. Falcone smiled, a slow, cruel smile that sent a wave of anger crashing over Harvey. He had lost. Not just the trial, but something more. The very idea of justice had slipped through his fingers, and all he could do was watch as Gotham's most notorious criminal walked free. But it wasn't over. As the courtroom erupted into chaos, Harvey felt a cold clarity settle over him. He had seen the truth now. The court wasn't just behind this trial. They were behind everything. And if they thought they could silence him, they were wrong. Because Harvey Dent wasn't done fighting. Not yet. Chapter 6: Blind Justice. The courthouse was empty now. The storm had passed, but the air inside still felt heavy, like the aftermath of a battle. Harvey Dent sat at his desk, staring at the stack of papers before him. The not guilty verdict echoed in his mind, repeating itself like a cruel reminder of the truth he had come to accept. Carmine Falcone had walked free, the system had failed, and Gotham remained in the grip of the powerful and the corrupt. But the real war wasn't over. Not yet. Harvey's office was dimly lit, shadows dancing along the walls as the streetlights outside flickered in the night. His hand hovered over the file marked with the court's symbol, the same symbol that had haunted him since the first body was found. Everything had come back to this. The Court of Shadows. The unseen force manipulating Gotham's justice system, twisting it to serve their own ends. They had rigged the trial, manipulated the jury, and silenced any opposition that stood in their way. But Harvey wasn't done fighting. He couldn't be. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, the weight of the past few weeks pressing down on him like a vice. Every step he had taken had led him deeper into the darkness, uncovering truths that had shattered his belief in the law and justice. The court had orchestrated everything, and now they had made him their next target. They had won the battle, but Harvey wasn't going to let them win the war. A knock on the door startled him from his thoughts. He opened his eyes, instinctively reaching for the gun he now kept at his side. His body was tense, adrenaline surging through his veins. Whoever was out there, they were coming for him. "Harvey, it's me." Rachel's voice was soft, but it carried a weight of urgency. Harvey relaxed, but only slightly. He crossed the room and unlocked the door, letting her in. She looked exhausted, her eyes dark with worry. She had been with him from the start, and now she was the only one he could trust. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. "What is it?" Harvey asked, his voice low, strained. Rachel handed him a folder, her hands trembling. "I've been digging deeper, trying to find any connection between the court and the people they've killed. And I found something. It's worse than we thought." Harvey opened the folder, his eyes scanning the documents inside. Bank transfers, confidential memos, surveillance reports, all linking the court to various high-profile figures in Gotham. Judges, police commissioners, city officials. The court had infiltrated every level of power, but this was more than that. These documents showed something much darker. They'd been funding the drug trade, the arms deals, Rachel continued, her voice shaking. But they're not just profiting off of it. They're controlling it. Every major crime syndicate in Gotham answers to them. Even Falcone. He's just a puppet, Harvey. Harvey felt the room spin for a moment. Everything he had fought for, everything he believed in, had been a lie. The court controlled Gotham. They had always controlled it. "I've tracked the money to offshore accounts," Rachel said, her voice barely a whisper now. "But there's one name that keeps coming up. Someone who's been funding the court's operations for years, hiding in plain sight." Harvey looked up at her, the weight of the question already pressing on his mind. "Who?" Rachel hesitated, her eyes locking with his. "Judge Milton Gage." The name hit Harvey like a punch to the gut. Judge Gage had been a mentor to him, a symbol of integrity in a city plagued by corruption. He had always believed in Gage, trusted him. And now he was part of the very thing Harvey had been fighting against. Harvey sank into his chair, his mind racing. Judge Gage. The man who had guided him, supported him. The man who had betrayed him. The rain started up again as Harvey drove through the streets of Gotham, his car cutting through the darkness like a knife. He knew where he was going. Gage lived in one of the wealthier districts of the city, far removed from the grime and decay that plagued the rest of Gotham. It made sense. Of course it did. As Harvey pulled up to the gate of Gage's mansion, he felt the familiar rage bubbling beneath the surface. This was it. The final piece of the puzzle. The man who had pulled the strings behind the court, who had orchestrated the rigged trial, the murders, everything. He got out of the car, the gun heavy in his hand. The rain was relentless, but Harvey barely noticed it. He was a man on a mission, driven by a need for justice that had long since burned away any notion of mercy. Gage opened the door before Harvey could knock, his face a mask of calm. He didn't look surprised to see Harvey standing there, drenched and furious. If anything, he looked resigned. "Harvey," Gage said quietly, stepping aside to let him in. "I was expecting you." Harvey entered without a word, his eyes cold, calculating. Gage led him to a study where a fire crackled on the hearth, the warm light casting shadows across the walls. The room was elegant, pristine, like everything else in Gage's life. "I know what you're thinking," Gage said, sitting behind his desk. "But it's not as simple as you believe." "Not as simple?" Harvey's voice was hard, barely controlled. "You've been controlling the court this whole time. You've been pulling the strings behind Falcone, behind the murders, behind everything." Gage's eyes were steady, unblinking. "I was protecting Gotham." Harvey felt his blood boil. Protecting? The word was a sick joke. "You've been protecting yourself. You've been protecting your power." "No," Gage said, his voice firm. "I've been protecting this city from tearing itself apart. The court is necessary, Harvey. Without it, Gotham would collapse into chaos. The criminals, the corrupt, they're all part of the balance. We can't let the city fall into anarchy." Harvey's grip tightened on his gun. "You call this balance? People are dying. Innocent people." Gage stood, his face hardening. "Innocence is a luxury, Harvey. This city can't survive on idealism. It needs order. And the court provides that. We keep the worst elements in check." we allow Gotham to function? By killing anyone who threatens your control? Harvey's voice was shaking now, with anger, with disbelief. You think that's justice? Gage's eyes softened, a faint hint of pity in his expression. Justice is blind, Harvey. You should know that by now. Sometimes, sacrifices have to be made for the greater good. Harvey's heart pounded in his chest, the gun trembling in his hand. Gage was right about one thing: justice was blind. But this wasn't justice. This was manipulation, control, and murder dressed up as order. I trusted you, Harvey said, his voice barely a whisper. I know, Gage replied. And I'm sorry. For a moment, the room was silent. Harvey's finger hovered over the trigger, the weight of the decision pressing down on him like a tidal wave. Gage watched him, unflinching, as if he knew how this would end. But then, Harvey lowered the gun. No, he said, his voice cold. I'm not like you. Harvey walked out of the mansion, the rain pouring down around him. The weight of everything that had happened pressed against his chest, suffocating him. He had learned the truth, but it hadn't brought him peace. If anything, it had only deepened the darkness inside him. The Court of Shadows still controlled Gotham. Judge Gage would continue his work, and the city would remain trapped in the same cycle of corruption and violence. But Harvey wasn't done. As he drove away from Gage's mansion, Harvey made a silent vow. He wouldn't stop fighting. He wouldn't stop pushing against the darkness that had consumed Gotham. The law might be broken, the system corrupt, but he would find a way. He had to. Because if he didn't, no one else would. And in the end, Gotham's justice was all that mattered. And that's just a glimpse into the dark world of Gotham's blind justice. But the shadows of Gotham run deeper, and Harvey Dent's fight is far from over. Will he uncover the truth, or will the city's corruption consume him? If you're ready for more tales of mystery, betrayal, and dark justice, make sure to hit like and subscribe so you never miss what's coming next. There's much more lurking in the shadows, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.